They say that the first rule of medicine is to do no harm. Well, Medic in Team Fortress 2 definitely begs to differ. Guys, today we are checking out how it feels to play Medic in Team Fortress 2. Let's do it.
Hey guys, Lazypurple here, ready to crack open another vertebra into the spinal column of history.
Whoa, this is way more psychedelic than Lazypurple's other stuff, but I'm into it.
From now onwards, I speak only of the human experience pertaining to playing the medic in Valve's fucking smash hit Team Fortress 2.
What madness is this?
So what does it feel like to play as class number 7? It's something close to the god orgasm.
What? Guys, this is a spiritual journey I was not prepared for. I would need to like meditate on this. I need to burn some incense. There is some spiritual awakening that needs to happen. In fact, let's just pause. Okay, we're back, and in order to ensure the spiritual purity of this entire thing, I actually have some incense. So we're just gonna purify the spiritual realm here. Get this thing going. There we go. Okay, all right. I'm feeling more pure already. By pure, I mean a little smoky, but such is the price. Okay, we're ready. We're ready. Bring it back. We're ready. I'm ready to experience the spiritual journey of playing Medic. Whoa. I am seeing through time. I mean, that's literally true. I'm traveling through, right? We're all traveling through time at the rate of, 1 second per second.
You are a tool in a 9-component workforce designed specifically for repair. Even at the potential expense of your own mortality, your main objective is to demonstrate a responsible use of your own power. While other tools are optimized for dealing damage and excommunicating other organisms down to a lower step of the food chain.
What? What is this?
The medic plays God in a special.
I mean, here's the thing. He's not wrong. There is a food chain, and that food chain example actually wisely, correctly understood that each level of the food chain demands smaller and smaller amounts of energy to function.
Special game of Win the War, created for.
As a human being, we need a shitload of calories of energy to power our huge OP brains, right? That's why we're scrawny and thin, and our brains are so OP that we can't even have 4 legs to move. We only get 2, and we just sort of gotta balance.
For his own amusement. For a moment, consider the medic's healing abilities as his cash flow or regular income. However, at the end of each second, whatever profit he doesn't spend will vanish out of existence. No savings will compound over time, so the medic is left in a street rules winner-takes-all deathmatch against the Lord of Time himself.
What? Okay, he has to heal as much as possible before he dies. This is some metaphysical stuff we're getting into here. We're like, okay, what does it mean to be a person in the world, right? And this is the subject of tremendous philosophies throughout history. For example, right, you get someone like Nietzsche, who argued that human beings' purpose is to ascend towards glory, to achieve some sort of glorious outcome. You have philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialists, who said there was no purpose and that you were free to do anything you wanted, that the sense of purpose and moral character and essentialism was largely a lie. of course, you have utilitarians who believe that as a human being, you have to do the most good. You even have people who believe that as human beings, hedonists, who think that we should pursue pleasure for as long as we're alive, finally, before we expire back into the raw substances of the universe. But here, Lazypurple is arguing that sort of a version of hedonism, right? He's arguing that you as a person, as a medic, that you are put on this earth to heal, to use your medigun to heal as much as possible. Sort of like the hedonists argue that we are put on this earth to pursue food and sexual pleasure and other pleasures, other things that our brains produce dopamine for, and oxytocin and serotonin, and that we chase them. And that's the purpose. That's the point, is to maximize pleasure and minimize pain. And he argues that to a medic who exists only as a thing that distributes a medigun, that it must be clear that its purpose is to heal as much as possible before, like all of us, his time runs out.
Depending on the amount of time since spending their last health, I have the opportunity to give someone between roughly 25 and 75 health per second. And every second wasted without healing is money I lose. Add into this the components of overheal, health temporarily surpassing the built-in limit to a literally superhuman surplus, and the possibilities to risk medigun healing time in exchange for superior heal rates, with the Crusader's crossbow or the amputator taunt. And the medic goes from being a bottom-of-the-barrel NPC placeholder for a real class to a precision stock trader that undergoes more explicit choices per second than any other character in Valve's franchise.
More choices per second. Okay, interesting. Yeah, this is another one of those philosophical points that he's making, where, so there's two arguments in philosophy. There's a lot, but two of the most iconic are called free will and determinism. Determinism says that everything is like a physics problem, right? For example, we know that without some sort of external interference, that this incense will burn down. It will burn down until it is a nub. This is because of the material that we know about. We know how it burns. We know that it is currently on fire, and that we can be certain that unless there's an outside intervention, that nothing will happen to this, that it will burn down, right? And it's similar to a person, right? You ever have a friend who you know exactly what they're going to do when something happens? You know that they are going to complain about the food at a restaurant when it shows up cold. That's just their nature. They almost, no matter how much you make fun of them for doing that thing, they continue to do it, right? And that is sort of the determinism argument, that even human beings aren't fundamentally different from, say, a well-trained dog or a poorly trained dog, right? That they will just behave in ways that are pretty much predictable. And that the only reason we can't fully predict them is because we don't have the calculation, we don't have the power. But if you had a godlike supercomputer, you could predict exactly what a person will do and say in any given situation, right? And of course, if you had that powerful a computer, you could do it for everyone. And we sort of, when we talk about the behavior of groups of people, like in the case of economics, you sort of see that, right? You don't know what one person will do in response to, say, rising prices, but we can be reasonably certain that collectively, a society in response to rising prices will reduce their spending. Now, that's determinism. Free will argues that there is some sort of core part of human beings that cannot be predicted, right? Or the universe, right? That cannot be predicted in a meaningful way. That we actually do get decision trees, right? You choose between two jobs, and truly no scientific process could ever determine what you're going to do, or what you're going to say, or how you're going to respond in a situation. That there's a core spiritual part of a human being that cannot be reduced to such quantifiable quantities, right? The sort of counter argument would be as though you were to say, take this And as we discussed, determinism says that it will come all the way down. It will burn to nothing. But we have a choice, right? Human beings, we get to impose on our environment something. So let's see if we can do that. And there we go. See, I have a power that allows me to impose my will on the world, right? But was that enough? Is that truly evidence of determinism or free will? Or could you have predicted I was going to do that? Tough to say. All right, so he argues anyway that the medic has authority. They have the ability to make these decisions.
Perhaps some of the medic's unpopularity in the Team Fortress 2 community is simply due to the fact that we are all too fucking stupid to play him. Usually this level of mentally strenuous and high-pressure, complex decision-making is only found in StarCraft, Kriegspiel chess, and the campaign for North Africa.
Yeah, I don't know if I buy any of that.
Like all I emerged from the molten center of
So far, we've analyzed the medic to best understand its nuance and unrecognized complicatedness. But let's take a step away from this view, outside of the firmament, away from the first sphere of shamanic consciousness, to the final level of sound consciousness, where the medic's experience is communicated through a language of vibrating waves that manifest equally sonic and visual experience. The game. The selfless, immersive experience as one embodies the medic and abandons their old identity as an exercise in understanding the ephemeral nature of the self.
Yes. Okay. So I think what he's trying to say is that there are levels to playing the medic, and that you can exist as someone who is playing the medic in a game, but at some point you have to pass through the threshold where you feel as though the medic is a class that you are engaging in, right? That it's interchangeable with other classes. But that to truly be great at being the medic, you have to view the medic as an extension of yourself. And then you have to view the world of the game as being just as much real as the real world that we live in. Because to the medic who cannot enter our world, that their world is real. And unlike you, who has free will, right? The medic does not. The medic cannot move. They cannot navigate. They cannot even exist without us, a being from another plane of existence, to enter and control them like a puppet. And so the only way to become great at that is either to allow yourself to fully inhabit the medic's body, or if you really want to get metaphysical, the idea that somewhere out there is another plane back, Plato's cave, if you will, and where the world of Platonic ideals, right? Plato argued that there was the physical world in which we all lived, and then there was another world. There was a world of ideal forms, right? There's a world of perfect justice, for example. But there was a world also of things like a perfect circle, and we know this to be true. It's like the equation, right? It's like, yes, you can draw a circle, but only through mathematics can we express what it means to be a circle. Similarly, right, what you would have to do is that somewhere out there is a perfect medic, is the person who plays medic more perfectly than anyone else on Earth, right? In fact, there is a programmed ideal. The medic always is in the right position. They always heal the player that needs the healing the most, and for the good of the team, can always find a way to do it. That's the ideal medic. And so again, like the medic cannot behave without you. If you could connect to that ideal medic, that perfect medic, and let you just be a conduit, just like the medic is a conduit for your will, then you can achieve the perfect medic game.
Only through my contribution to my team will I reach union with the absolute.
That's what I'm talking about. See? Union with the absolute perfect ideal of a Team Fortress 2 game.
Only through my contribution to my team will I reach union with the absolute.
Now let
This incense may set off my fire alarm, by the way.
me tell you something most other TF2 YouTubers are afraid to admit. The experience of obtaining a full Uber charge and employing it strategically to secure my team's victory contains a specific joy that personally takes me back to when I lived in Denmark and the first time I took 2 DPMP. Perhaps similar to the way that sexual arousal triggered by a novel experience with a house pet in youth
Whoa!
can contribute to the onset of zoophilia in adulthood. My deeply sensuous and spiritually draining relationship with playing Medic is likely due to an associative miswiring in the brain between my history taking norepinephrine uptake inhibitors and lengthy sleep-deprived gaming sessions, playing Medic in pubs, chasing this enigmatic
Acute psychosis. Okay, interesting.
pleasure until I reach a euphoric climax and find myself waking up the next day close to the time when the sun is setting. However,
Okay, what he is describing is what we probably now call things like childhood trauma. This is the idea that as a child, your brain interprets the stimuli of the world in really specific ways. And that is because human beings, unlike, say, a giraffe or a donkey, right, we're born into the world with very little of our programming set. Right, there's a couple of things that we will sort of do, right? We will probably learn how to walk on 2 legs without much encouragement. Maybe even eating food and that sort of thing. But beyond that, everything else has to be programmed into us. And so your brain as a child is really malleable because it is being fed data about the world in which it must exist. And so when bad things happen or just unusual things happen to a child, their brain has to take that information and structure itself in a way that it can survive and thrive in this new frightening world, right? So how does the brain do that, right? Well, unfortunately, we don't know much about all of it, but we know, for example, that when parents care for their child in a way that is sometimes described as anxious or avoidant, right? The child grows up with a really skewed instinctive understanding of human relationships. They're not really conscious of why they are constantly afraid that, say, their romantic partners or their friends secretly hate them, right? But that is often an outgrowth of the way their parents interacted with them. Similarly, you have traumatic experiences, right? Certain types of physical, emotional, or even sexual trauma can produce certain types of personality changes so dramatic that we actually call them personality disorders. And these can often, again, not always, but often, affect the way a person relates to the world around them for the rest of their lives. So while what Lazy is not describing, he's not describing something bad, but he's describing a really, really unique set of circumstances, specific series of events that occurred to him as a youth, and that now they've manifested in him chasing this sort of dragon, chasing this feeling that he got as a child. And I think that's pretty typical. You either chase the positive feelings you got as a child and the circumstances that led to it. For example, the things you had to do to receive, say, attention from your parents, or you run from them, the things that made you scared and frightened, and you structure your life to avoid it.
However, much like animal fetishists, and probably due to the irretractable loyalty to my own subjective experience, I'm convinced this neural entangling is far from coincidence. Why would the other classes continue to fall flat when Medic delivers again and again in an almost unearthly manner to satisfy my hunger for gaming.
See, it makes you wonder if this is someone who derives satisfaction from not being the person who gets the kills, but the person who is aiding and abetting and enabling. At the end of the day, right, who deserves credit for the kills of an overcharged heavy? The medic or the heavy? Heavy is not an especially tough class to play, and it's not an especially tough class to get kills with. So you ask yourself then, when they get kills, whose skill is really doing it, right? But who gets the credit? Who is seen out front, right? And it's obviously heavy. Now, with Lazy, you've got this strange dynamic. I think there is something to him that says, I don't want to be seen, yet I want to experience the credit. I want the limelight. And look at this really unique. He's one of a small number of content creators who actually doesn't show their face and yet is a highly regarded creator. Right? Isn't that similar to how the role of medic? In a way, you obviously need and depend on the medic. The medic is essential. It's a linchpin, but it's not what the enemy focuses on. Right? When you're being blasted by that heavy, you focus on the heavy. You don't think about the medic. And yet you still want to be seen. You want credit, right? You're not a total support entity like an engineer or the sniper, whose entire playstyle relies on being unseen and almost uncredited. It's a very interesting psychological dive we've done here.
No pain, there's no nothing like that. It's just pure, unadulterated lust, pure fucking energy. It is raw and primal. It is like...
I'm getting demonetized. Whoa!
If I was to strip down naked and kill a bear...
Oh, man.
...with my bare fucking hands, you feel so...
This is like some Russell Brand stuff here.
So fucking strong. It's like a very strange old tribal warrior warlord, like invincible feeling.
Guys, I am not even... We are more than halfway through this video, and I am not any closer to knowing how to play medic. Is this Lazy's way of saying he has no idea?
Observe this clip here. Did you see that? You may not have noticed it, but I just had something most medic mains, and medic mains only, can fraternally relate to and bond over. It's an out-of-body experience, where I'd suddenly implanted myself into the perspective of my heal target. No longer was I medic, from Germany, panicking over how to distribute the wealth. Suddenly, I was Action Man, sucked into a world of heroism that I myself was sponsoring in a meta way, as if puppeteering and both believing that I am the puppet.
Did I not call this? I don't watch these videos ahead of time, guys. I'm just gonna put that out there. You've seen me do it because I say things that get contradicted. This is exactly what this is, right? So what Lazy is arguing is that we talked about the 3 levels back. The ideal of medic, you, the player of the game. You notice he said, I am medic from Germany. I don't think Lazypurple's from Germany. I think he's an American or a Dane or something. But then, deeper, to play the medic, medic must enter, spiritually become the heal target. Only by completing the thread from the ideal of the heal, the ideal of the support class, all the way through you, the player, to medic, the class, who can only exist as a puppet, to finally arriving at the heal target, the font, the origin, the final resting place of this healing energy.
At this point in the video, you may have begun to reach your own startling conclusions of how deep the medic rabbit hole goes. Those medic mains you once considered retarded, or maybe even too immature, are actually regularly accessing the gateway to the greatest existential dilemmas of our time on a regular basis. Cognitive scientist Douglas Hofstadter only could have dreamed to realize that one day, not the elite academics, nor the philosophical community, but the layman youth, the consumers of a free-to-play video game, would be exploring the concepts of the strange loop as the result of it playing out directly through the first-person experience. Not from reading his book or approaching it by way of an intellectual...
I am a strange loop. I mean, I guess that sort of implies maybe that somehow that healing target loops back around to the ideal. It somehow contributes to the ideal. I don't know.
dissection, but from the opposite end. Medics clambering with enlightenment for becoming familiar with this strange paradox of the puppet that puppeteers itself.
I like that. The puppet that puppeteers itself. Yeah, this is like the fusion of free will and determinism he's talking about. This idea that if you have free will, it's sort of like, it's trying to take, right, in quantum physics, you have particles, light particles, photons. They behave as both waves and as particles. So they behave as waves that fluctuate, and they behave as particles. They pass one at a time through a space. And so, but both of those things have to be true in order for the rest of physics to work. It's actually one of the biggest arguments that I've ever heard for that we live in a simulation, because at our baseline, you have to create this divergence. Something has to be both matter and energy at the same time, this tiny contradiction. And from this flows all of physics. And so the argument, perhaps, is that, like we talked about free will and determinism, that both are true at the same time. Human beings are both utterly predictable and have an inalienable free will to split, to create their own sort of decision trees through life. I mean, you watched it, right? You watched me lick my fingers and extinguish the incense, and yet there it is, burning, right? So is the incense out? I mean, you watched me extinguish it, or is the incense alight? You watch it burn, you just saw it burn. And so I think this is what he's saying, is that you have to accept this core contradiction that you are both a puppet, but also the puppeteer. And that both have to be true simultaneously. And once you can own that contradiction, then and only then can you achieve greatness as a medic player.
Outside of Nick's unusual relationship with the inner being, he is also gifted the assets of battle that keep the other classes steadily held down to the earth. Due to the medic's general insufficiency in a one-v-one scenario, the do-or-die moments that force him to engage in combat are exactly what make the medic so exciting. It really feels like you're going to die when you play medic. After becoming
But what does it mean to really feel like you're going to die when you play medic? You're really going to die in any class. And you'll really die in this, the real world. Will you die in the platonic ideal? Is there an ideal of you? Some sort of perfect iteration of you? Something that exists only in the same place where the math of a circle exists? And will that thing of you, that part of you, persist after your corporeal being dies, after the medic dies, after the medic's healing target dies, after all the thread from the healing target to the medic to you, to the ideal of a Team Fortress 2 player, right? Or are you just helping to define that, right? Are you just part of this ideal that somewhere out there's a perfect Team Fortress 2 player, and at your best moments, you help create what that is? Just like we only know a circle because we've drawn 100 million of them. And finally, after 100 million circles, do we go, actually, I think mathematically we can define this thing.
Desensitized to your value by playing other expendable characters, like Spy. The medic helps lift you up and realize the sanctified nature of life. Like a troubled person so consumed with peril that they toy with the edge of life and death. As medic, you are forced to consider the implications of your own death and the interconnectedness of us all. Even if I see that I can afford to be a sacrifice in this moment, Will the sacrifice be one I can truly go through with, knowing that my teammates will pay the ultimate cost?
I mean, this is the question, right? If you're a medic and you fail to heal that soldier, then you will die later, right? You will die too, just causally down the chain. And if you know that soldier is going to die, and therefore determinism dictates that you will die after, because you're a medic, you can't defend yourself, right? So if your death is inevitable and the soldier's death is inevitable, then what choice do you have? Some argue that you should simply try to be the ideal medic, try to be the best version of the medic in that window while you exist. You know, he appears to be doing so, supporting his soldier from behind the wall, right? Not to avoid his death, but to play the role as best as possible. And this is sort of an inverted version of hedonism, what we talked about earlier. This idea that medic is meant to heal and support, and so if you must die, you should die as the best medic possible, as with the strongest connection to the ideal medic, because that's what will persist.
Without heals, without love.
The feelings involved in playing medic are often too visceral and intense to do justice in words. But this is exactly what draws players to him, again and again. It is this heart-wrenching struggle between glory and calamity that is felt most personally for the medic, because he's forced to be the most conscious of the people around him, and to be the most conscious of how he is interacting with them. Great medics don't merely decide the outcomes of matches. To say that they just win games is to miss the point entirely. Medics change games.
They're sort of arguing that medics do ultimately possess free will at a level that other classes simply do not. A heavy will always just heavy his way through problems, and a soldier will always soldier their way through problems with varying levels of proficiency. But a medic can truly change games. If a medic truly has free will to dictate the success or failure of a game, well, as we discussed, he doesn't. He's both the puppet and the puppeteer.
At a completely fundamental level. In the same way that a car crash can suddenly bring you to hell, or that the unexpected face of a loved one in a public place can change your brain's entire interpretation of that environment in an instant. The presence of a medic, quite literally, changes the game that you are playing. And what could feel better than being responsible for that?
Okay, that's weird because he's totally right. I have nothing else to add. Okay, guys. Wow. All right. Thanks to Lazypurple for taking us on this bizarre journey through a large portion of the Western philosophical tradition. And if you enjoyed this, guys, let me know in the comments. The algorithm loves comments. And did I get anything right? What other thinkers do you think weighed in on this? And where do you come down? Free will, determinism, the purpose that we're out here. Let me know. And I don't know, hit the dislike button if you... I can't see it. I don't even know where I'd find it. But, you know, you can let YouTube let the algorithm know that, you know, you can like or dislike my philosophy. Okay, guys, that's all I got. See you next time.